In this video I will use CarlaCreates by VaessenCreative Christmas ornaments with the matching 3D embossing folder. I also will use part of the CarlaCreates cardstock for the colors of the card, because there will be no coloring for this card. The only shade we will add is from the VersaMark Dazzle ink pad in the color Frost. Stay tuned if you want to see what possibilities there are for this ink. Enjoy watching! Hello, it's Cisvolk! Time to enjoy card making with me! CarlaCreates' newest Christmas release for VaessenCreative contains a stack of different colored papers. Because not everyone likes to color their images, I thought it was a nice idea to do some paper piecing for my first card. The paper is sturdy, so you can also use it as a card base. As you see, there are 2 sheets of each color in this pack. There is silver and gold paper included, as well as craft paper and beige paper. All 12 colors in the set are nice and bright and suitable for card making all year round. It is maybe a bit early for making Christmas cards, but you can never start too early. I will be making Christmas ornaments. To start, we take a regular white piece of paper and cut it 13 cm square. Next step is to stamp the text you want to use on that white background. There is I love hanging with you, Happy Holidays, and on the outer stamp it says Have an incredible Christmas, which I will be using. I look at the lines on my clear block to see if I stick the text straight. And if I turn the clear block, I can see it much better if I succeeded in doing that. If not, I can still reposition the clear stamp to the right place. I can also use the lines on my work mat, or if you don't have one, the lines on a piece of paper. If you don't know me yet, I am fond of heat embossing. And before heat embossing, you'll have to make the paper anti-static using an embossing pouch or talcum powder. I will do everything in this card with heat embossing, but no worries if you don't like doing that. You can also make the same card with just regular ink and no heat embossing. For the text, I found the color Seedless Preserves in Distress Oxide ink. That ink is suitable for heat embossing and it matches the paper I will be using. When stamping, I look at the lines on my clear block to see if I stamp straight. I stamp in the top left corner of the paper. Give the ink some time to transfer to the paper. Water-based inks take some longer than permanent inks. To heat emboss the text, I use clear embossing powder from Reindeer. Sometimes I add the powder twice, to be sure that every spot is covered. I tap lightly to keep a thick layer of powder. And when the powder is back into the jar with the lid closed, I blow over the paper to remove unwanted grains. I won't be showing you my heat embossing every time, but for this time I tell it so people who are not familiar with it can learn from it. There are loads of videos I made where I tell you all about heat embossing, so watch them all if you are interested. I want to dry emboss this card panel. The reason I am stamping and heat embossing now is that I cannot do it after dry embossing, as the paper would no longer be smooth. I now take that super cute new embossing folder. Isn't it adorable? I'm stunned how Carla makes these funny designs over and over again. All cute ornaments with eyes in 3D. Before embossing, be sure that the ink is dry or that the heat embossed powder is cooled down. Otherwise you will ruin your stamping or you will ruin the embossing folder. I want the embossing raised on the card, but the paper won't be lying flat on the raised part of the folder. So what's easier to do is to turn the paper and line it out on the flat side of that embossing folder. That way you can also aim where to place it before you run it through your machine. I aim where the bubbles just touch the edge of the paper in the top and in the left border. If it does not fit well enough, I will later cut off a small strip. Look how cute this is! The embossed text worked out perfect. It is simply embossed into the Baubles pattern. I will cut off that tiny border where there is embossing on the edge. The square card will now be 5 inches approximately. All bubbles fit in the 5-inch square now. For my card, I will be using paper in the colors raspberry, silver glitter, dark red, light red and purple. You immediately see that my Distress Oxide Seedless Preserves matches that purple paper. The purple paper I will use as a base card. I cut the paper at 14.5 cm in the length. Next I make a fold at 14.5 cm. I am used to using my blade for scoring, but I am careful. I could also use a large scoreboard for making the fold. You will have to crease the fold using a bone folder or something sturdy anyway. Doing this will make your card look neater. By cutting the edge now, I make a perfect square card base. So now we can put that card panel in the middle of that colored card base. But first we will make the ornaments. I have an album in which I keep the whole Christmas collection. Here you see a sneak peek of the other stamps, stencils, embossing folder and dies that are in the same collection. You can watch CarlaCreates video to see it all. And I will use it in my future videos, of course. On these magnet sheets I store my dies. These are also from the Christmas collection. I will use them in another video. Now I will be using the small Christmas ornament. These 4 papers I chose for my card. The lighter red I keep aside for the tongues of the figures. On the red one I will stamp the bubbles. And these 2 papers I will use for die cutting. I will cut a few bubbles, maybe 3 out of each sheet of paper. I think this silver paper is so beautiful, it's almost a shame to use it. But I've learned that it is even more of a waste not to use it at all. I cut close to the die, so I waste as little paper as possible. This also prevents me from having to die cut the paper multiple times, which can make it look ugly. I will use the bubbles to place in the background. Later I can see how I want to position them. As I said earlier, for this card no coloring, only stamping on paper. We will choose 3 ornaments, a neutral one or one with a pattern. That doesn't make a difference for the way we will be working. I also want to heat emboss my stamped images, so I use that anti-static pouch again. Never mind that you can see the white powder now on that gorgeous red paper. We can wipe that off later after heat embossing. And if you don't want to heat emboss for several reasons, no worries, you can just stamp on this colored paper with just black ink or even another color ink. I use VersaMark ink, the normal VersaMark ink, and I stamped the Christmas ornament on the red paper. You can hardly see it, but it is there. And then I add some silver embossing powder on top. I repeat that for 2 other stamps as well. I use the silver embossing to match the silver paper I used for die cutting the ornaments. This is so nice if you want to use a nice stamp but don't want to color. And I will even add a nice effect to make it look more round and not flat. But first I will have to add the mouth and if I want some indications for where the eyes will be. And for that I will be doing some more stamping and heat embossing. So that matte finish will have to stay on for a while longer. When paper piecing, you use colored paper for adding color instead of coloring the image. You don't have to color and don't have to mask things off. So I can stamp the mouth on top of the lines of the ornament. That tongue though, I will have to stamp again, cut it out and glue it on top of the mouth I just stamped and heat embossed. I stamp the mouth on silver glitter paper first because I want the gap of the mouth in silver. And the same goes for that other open mouth. You can heat emboss on this glitter paper, however you need to be careful not to heat it too long. The glitter will melt. If your heat tool is heated up well enough before aiming it to the paper and you do not heat it for too long, you will be okay. I just overheated it to test it, and if you look closely, you see some melted parts. It is not a problem because these parts will be covered with other paper. And that other paper is the bright red sheet, which I use for the tongues. Again, stamped with VersaMark ink and heat embossed in silver. We also need eyes. These we stamp on white paper. But for some eyes you also need red paper. The eyelids are shown here, so we can stamp half of the eyes on red paper. For other eyes you need to think a little harder. Eyes that are open need to be white. If an eye is closed, that one needs to be red. You can play with it if you like. How about a blue eye? And yes, this is a lot of work, but again, you can also just stamp with normal ink and skip the heat embossing, of course. Cut out all white eyes as a single piece, including those with half-closed eyelids. The red eyelids you cut separately. You can glue them on the white eyelids later on. We also need silver caps for the baubles. Only stamp the caps on the silver paper. When cutting, I use a pair of precision scissors and I rotate the ornament while cutting. I aim my scissors very close to the embossed line, on the right side of the line. For cutting that cap and hook on top, I don't make a fuss. I just cut right through that hook. When gluing the pieces together, it will be sturdy enough and you will not notice it at all. If you cut tiny pieces like this, take in mind to cut the tiny and fragile part first. In this case the inner part of the hook, and cut the easier part, the outer part in this case, last. You don't specifically have to cut both red and silver hooks. You could just cut off the red hook and only cut the silver cap and hook and glue that on the ornament. Now we don't need to stamp on the baubles anymore. We can remove the white layer of anti-static powder from the red paper. Using a microfiber cloth, it is done very easily. A short-haired one works best. Sometimes you need to moisten it with a little bit of water. Be sure to use a new piece of cloth each time. Now I can finally show you what I use that VersaMark Dazzle ink for. Frost is the variation I have. It is a silver tinted one. Until now I used the normal VersaMark. This one works just the same, only it has a silver shimmer. And the ink pad looks exactly the same as the normal one does. You don't see the difference, so you will have to keep the right lid on. But the ink is different though. What I will do now with this Dazzle ink, I will use it to add a glitter shading to the baubles, and I do that by ink blending. I have designated a normal blending brush for use with this ink. I take a little ink on my brush, then I take an ornament and then I blend very lightly to the edge of the paper. I make rotating movements from my work mat onto the edge of the ornament. Look what happens, it is slightly visible now. The paper gets a shimmer. That ink will dry in a moment and then you will see the shading and a shimmer. So I only add that shimmer to the edges of the ornament and not in the middle. We want the middle to stay clear, so we create a dimensional effect. The bauble will shine and have a slightly darker shade at the edges. You already see the difference. We repeat this for all ornaments. Let's also add a tiny bit on the eyelids. Don't try to color it in completely, because you want to create a shadow and not a flat colored area. And also let's give some dimension to the pink baubles that will be in the background of the card. That Dazzle ink exists for a long time. I only discovered it recently and I wish I had sooner. This is just the thing I need to pimp my Christmas cards. And you know, this is not the only way you can use this ink. That white embossed background could still use a little pimping up. And for that we can also use the Dazzle ink. If we keep it flat on the embossing and do not press but just swipe it over the surface of the paper, we transfer some of that ink to the raised parts of the embossing. Here you can see it shine. It still needs to dry, but it keeps shiny. Glue all pieces together now. The silver caps go on top of the red caps. The red eyelids go on top of the white eyes. I have used 3 different types. One where their eyes were half closed, one where there is one open and one closed eye, and 2 open eyes. You see that you need to use an extra color paper for some of them. For the mouth the same. We glue the red tongues on the silver mouth. Now we have a silver mouth with a red tongue. And that we glue on the corresponding spot on the bubble. If you stick the eyes slightly higher or lower, you immediately get a completely different look. It is fun to play around with. You can also take it into account that the eyes are looking at each other, or at the text on the card. You can also stick the eyes and mouth slightly more to the side, so that your Christmas bubble looks to the side. If you have trouble with it, I advise you to stamp test bubbles on a scrap piece of paper and test out what works best. On a scrap stamped image, you can find your favorite combinations to save for later and to remember where to stamp or glue the eyes and mouth. The bubbles are fun the way they are right now, but if you want to pimp them up some more, you can use a Versamarker to add shading on colored paper. Little details make shadows and make the image more dimensional. I add little dots of ink to the top of the tongue, the lower edge of the closed eye, the bottom and side of the tongue in the open mouth, and the outer corners of the half open eyes. An alcohol marker in a light grey tint or in a light blue tint can be used to create a shadow or shine to the eye. Draw a fine line on one side of the eye. Do not touch the edge of the eye. Leave a small margin of white space between the edge of the eye and the line you draw. You can leave the eyes like this, or add black dots using a black permanent marker, or in my case a black glaze pen. This is the one that makes a black embossed dot or line. I place dots exactly on top of the silver eyes. It gives them more expression. Now we stick the Christmas bubbles on the card panel. Some will be glued flat and other will be glued raised using foam blocks. Adding dimension makes the card look more interesting. I edited the footage of the video, but believe me that I tried multiple settings for the bubbles in the background. Also, I took the bubbles with the eyes and checked on which position they would look nicest. Do not glue the bubbles on the edge of the card panel, but place them over the edge. You can cut off the bubbles and it will look more playful and realistic than when you put them all precisely on the edge of the paper. I want to make one Christmas bubble wobble with a handmade action wobbler. This wobbler I cut myself out of acetate using the action wobbler die in CarlaCreates' previous release. You can check out my videos about the action wobbler. In them I tell you 3 ways to attach them and all useful info about using them. You see me make a small cut in the card panel. Next I stretch the acetate action wobbler to achieve a better wobbling effect. Then I slide the action wobbler through the cuts. I secure the action wobbler at the back with tape. At the front I attach a foam block. The Christmas bubble sticks to this well enough. If you want an even better attachment, I suggest using a glue dot. The bubble can wiggle. It looks so funny, like he had a Christmas party already. Let me show you the third way to use the VersaMark Dazzle ink. The third way is to simply use it as a stamp ink. When you stamp with this ink, you get a watermark effect with a glossy finish. It only works on colored paper. Keep in mind that the print needs to dry for a moment, so be careful not to smudge it. Clean your work surface in between stamping to keep the back of the card clean. And rotate your stamp to get a variation of the prints. I stamp the edges of the base card with the Christmas bubbles, and this gives me a nice background for my card that is not too distracting. Using double-sided tape, I stick the card panel to the card. I now see I almost forgot to add highlights. I put a small dot in the pupils and a small stripe on the tongues. To decorate the envelope, you can emboss the flap of the envelope. This is so special. I'm so happy that CarlaCreates now also designs such nice and funny embossing folders. Adding VersaMark Dazzle is subtle and adds that Christmas shimmer we want on our Christmas cards. Apply it very carefully because the ink is on a spongy ink pad. If you press too hard, ink will also get between the figures. Although this is not a big problem, it is not very noticeable on white paper. I'm curious to hear from you what your opinion is about this ink. For the front of the envelope, you can also stamp different Christmas bubbles. And choose if you want to stamp them entirely or on the edge. You can make a lot of different bubbles because you can mix and match the bubbles, the eyes and mouth. You can use them creatively and have them look all directions. Did my video inspire you to create something? Then tag your work with @Cisvolk and use the hashtag #InspiredByCisvolk so I can see it and maybe even share it. And if you are interested in buying any of the products I use, you can find all info for them in the description below the video. Go check out some other videos I recorded and leave a thumbs up to show your appreciation. I will do my best to upload a new video next Monday. Have a nice day and I will see you next time. Bye bye!